Good afternoon, JMU sports fans. Welcome to a special edition of the Breeze TV Sports Desk. I'm Jordan Simal, and we're joined by a local legend out here. This is Mr. Curt Dudley. I don't think this man needs any introduction. As far as JMU sports are concerned, where they are, he is there as well. So, Curt, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the kind words there, but just trying to do my job. That's what it comes down to.
Yes, sir. Well, Curt, I know people out here love you just because you do such a good job at doing your job. So we're thrilled to have you on the show. And we know that right now this has to be just an incredibly, awkward point for your career with just as far as media and with sports coverage is concerned. And before we get into really any of that, August 7th is when the news came out from JMU that football's canceled. 3 days later on the 10th, it was announced that fall sports in their entirety were canceled. Well, not canceled, but suspended rather. When the news hit, especially with football, what were your initial thoughts and what was kind of the reaction when the news was released to the public?
Well, I think certainly a lot of disappointment, a lot of hope on the front side of that. But when it does kind of hit you with that dose of reality, there is that unfortunate circumstance and you just are disappointed about it all. And if you're accustomed, as many of us are, and going through these seasonal routines, it certainly does break up your routine, not only for us individually, but of course as a campus and a community and the JMU Nation, which certainly has come to love football and all of its sports programs at JMU. So I think let me back up just a little bit though, Jordan, if you don't mind, in the sense
Sure.
that I want to give a lot of credit to all the student athletes, the administration, both athletically and the schools, at least for doing their diligence and going through detail after detail after detail, and for the student athletes to keep their motivation going, knowing that was definitely going to be the case. And so there was those aspects of it, and personally for the student athletes and the students in general. And I think back to when I was a college student, and if I were to have a segment of my on-campus and college experience taken away, just like you to a certain degree too, although you're battling through it as many of us are, just thinking about that loss of opportunity. But we still try to be resilient and figure out what we can do to capture as much of this opportunity as we can.
That's right. I agree. Just got to make the best out of what we're given, right?
Absolutely. I mean, if you don't do that, then it's going to be really hard to go with the day-to-day daily grind.
Yes, sir. And that applies to more than just sports. That's life in general as well.
Yeah, no doubt about it. No doubt about it.
All right. Wise words of wisdom right there from the man himself. But I really want to, as far as the broadcasting portion of your career is concerned, because where JMU broadcasting and media is, you're there. And as far as everything, I can't remember a JMU game that I would watch on TV where you weren't in the press box somewhere, even volleyball games. Mm-hmm. And right now, what is the state kind of JMU broadcast and media? And right at the moment, everyone that's been employed, what's the situation going on right there?
Well, I'm a part of the athletics communications operation, which is directed by Kevin Warner, the assistant athletic director, who at one time was actually a student of mine. So it's interesting to have him as my supervisor, but that's been a nice compliment to each other. So what we have done, one way that I use a lot of sport analogies, and one way that I look at this is that in our profession, we jump on the treadmill and we go, go, go. I mean, we're from season to season all year long. And what we've taken the advantage of is, one, jumping off the treadmill to tackle some of those tasks, some of those long overdue projects that are kind of behind the scenes. They may not all be the glorious projects, but the ones that we've been sitting on the back shelf, for a long, long time. So we've tried to do a little bit of that. And right now, certainly with social media as one of our tools, that has helped athletics communications a lot, because otherwise we would still be working on, all due respect, with all external media, just providing them with information. We still do, but yet it does provide us this ability to get out some information, whether it's right now, obviously it's not game results, but we do have a lot of stories that we always wish we could tell. And you're probably experiencing that now too. And everybody wants to talk to all these student athletes because they want to tell their story, because it fills this non-game void. So there are those kind of opportunities that we're looking for. And one thing that we're doing with another big one with athletics communications that I'm helping to spearhead part of that is, the coaches, their challenge right now with recruiting. Although it seems to be going very well from what I'm hearing, and much of that is indirectly, but we're trying to help them as best we can. So just this week, we released our first of a series of explaining to student athletes, to the recruits about the integrated health and sports performance program, which has as much to do with the overall success on and off the field as what they do on the field sometimes. So we're utilizing video capabilities, getting out that message, and giving the coaches some tools in their video recruiting toolbox to work with. They're not going to be all that fancy, but they are good information, which is very important. Sometimes it's more important for the parents to hear this information because they know, yes, we're taking care of the student athletes, but it's part of the behind the scenes and the success of our program overall, particularly when you look at the last 5 years.
Yeah, and as far as the recruitment is concerned, I still see updates, whether it be on Facebook, Twitter, about, hey, JMU football just signed this recruit. So it still amazes me, but, life has to go on despite all of this, and recruiting is definitely a part of that. But it's caught me off guard, but I'm glad it's been going so well. And the fact that y'all are involved, that just has to process a lot smoother.
One of my big concerns with the stoppage here, the last 5 years have been great for this athletic program. This is my 33rd year, so I've seen the majority of the NCAA Division I history of this school. And so one of my concerns was, can we maintain the momentum that we've had the last 5 years with the number of CAA titles, the number of NCAA appearances, the national championship appearances, 4, and we're 2 out of 4 in those national title games. With the 1 win for football and the 1 win for women's lacrosse. So that was kind of my concern, but it's nice to see that what the brand image of JMU is, because that, I think, is really helping us. You go back and the two appearances on College Game Day puts it in everybody's mind. And so from a football recruiting standpoint, they know who JMU is. And it's just not here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. It goes beyond when you look at some of the commitments and some of the student athletes that we're talking to, and the ones that have been signed, in the most recent past, even with going through 3 coaches over the last several years too, and the success that those 3 gentlemen have had with the program.
I know personally, I'm from Chicago, and I have friends that knew nothing about JMU 4 or 5 years ago, and now that they realize I go to JMU, they're all so excited about it, and they're like, "Oh, you go to James Madison," and I'm amazed that they know what James Madison is, but the word has definitely gotten out there as far as the brand. Absolutely. When you're talking about these sports though, and the brands and bringing in these young athletes and just everything that comes with the College Game Day appearances and the championship win in 2016 and the lacrosse championship, there are thousands of student athletes on this campus. And like you said earlier as well, we're trying to bring the stories out of all of them in an era, we unfortunately don't know how long it's going to last, but where there are no live game scores at the moment. Is there any particular story revolving around either a student athlete or a coach that really was impacted in particular by the suspension rather of fall sports?
I don't know, Jordan, that I can pick out one individual. I think with all of us, certainly we've been impacted in our own unique ways. And, fortunately, I haven't heard of any real, I think collectively student athletes across the country, not only JMU, are certainly this stoppage and starting of possibilities and the disappointments, and that all kind of takes and drags you down mentally. It does, even us as professionals who've been doing it a long, long time. But I think collectively, just the individual stories out there, and as I was going to say, I don't know, and there could be, and hopefully not, some tragic stories that have resulted out of the COVID, and I'm sure, I've heard of a few folks that we know that have contracted it, but have overcome it, very, very well. Some of it has been public. One I share with you is Shelly Clays-Balcom, our women's lacrosse coach. She came up with it back in March. I believe it was March, but I didn't learn about it till, much later, but she has made that public. And just to hear some of the folks that have, had it, and yeah, I wish I could tell you a particular story, but Jordan, I don't know that I have that to share with you.
In some cases, maybe just less stories revolving around that. It might be a good thing, actually.
Yeah, I guess you could consider it that way. Yes, absolutely.
It's great. And right now with everything being suspended, and it's up in the air as to when we would get back to the hard court and to the football field, the soccer fields, there are the talks of spring ball, and it would be significantly different than how it's been in years past. And this would involve essentially every fall sport playing at the same time as every winter and spring sport as well. And I remember the first show that we had 2 weeks ago, we addressed how it's a possibility that you may see a football game, a basketball game, and a softball game all on your calendar roster of events that you could attend during the day. But my question is, if there was a chance of this happening, but there was still an uncertainty with COVID in the air, would it be a good idea for the university, in your eyes, to go ahead and try and pursue maybe an all-sports spring league? Or would it be a better idea to just hold off from sports just for 2020 for the entire calendar season and maybe return once we're certain that we have the safety of our athletes above all else before they return to the field?
Well, I think even though we have had some of the incidences that we have at the university overall, that there is continued caution going forward, and the health of all our community is certainly at the top of the rung. And some of that health, though, is also trying to give effort. One of the best ways I described, or I had heard it described, was by an athletics director across the country who said, you can imagine you're at a football game, you're down by 3 touchdowns when the fourth quarter is there, emerges, but that doesn't mean you throw in the towel. You still can try to work on that. I think we're still a little too far out on the calendar to really determine that. I think, just from my observation too, when we started to hear about the fall sports going into the spring sports, I think that was just kind of a blanket idea, concept. And I think, as one thing to kind of observe this whole time, is concepts get tossed out there, and we hear a lot of, let's try this, let's try that. But then there comes the time where, all right, we've got to take and learn what the nuts and bolts, what are the details involved with this concept. And as we started this conversation, Jordan, giving credit to the athletic administration, to sports medicine, Tom Custer and his crew, to the nth degree that they went to every detail. And some of the things are just incredible. Here's a simple example of that. When the football Dukes came back and they were in their little pods, right? So one of the things that they did was they didn't put all the running backs in a pod. They didn't put all the linemen in a pod, because if you lost that unit to quarantine, you couldn't play the game. So you had to separate them out a little differently. So, Percy might have been in one group, Jawan might have been in another group, but one of them stays healthy, the other one has to go in quarantine. You still had a possibility. So those are just some of the details. That's not what happened, but those are just some of the probabilities or possibilities that could have come about it. I think right now we're at the stage, though, that if we're looking at, and this is just me talking, okay, we're at the stage where if we are going to have overlapping seasons, that we are starting to have to look, how can we do that to that nth degree detail? And the one thing that it does involve is human resources. The athletics communication staff is not going to grow any between now and the spring. But if we've got a softball game, a basketball game, and a football game going on all the same day, well, some of those people are the same people if they're played at different seasons, okay? So we will have to probably cut back on some things, some of the in-game operations. You may not see as much social media activity, for example, because the SID and someone else is busy with actually the game management. They got to keep the statistics. They got to keep that rolling. And all the other responsibilities they have within the package of a game. So, I think we're at that stage now where we're going to have to look at what those layers provide or are going to present in terms of the challenges of pulling that off if we do have them. at the same time. If we are several weeks from now, and just recently this week, as early as yesterday, from what I understand from the news, there was a stoppage in one of the vaccines. That those are things we can't predict, and I think we are moving along at a breakneck speed. But technology and knowledge allows you to do that, but it doesn't give you a guaranteed outcome. It may speed that outcome up a little bit, but you still may not know where that is from a scientific aspect. And I do have a little biology background, so I have a little bit of a feeling like I know what I'm talking about there. The vaccine, as I said earlier to you off air, the vaccine's the commissioner right now. It's making the primary, last decisions on whether we're going to get a chance to play or not. And, that still is, in my mind, is still the unknown as far as even the spring is concerned, from what I'm reading from the media and what information I am able to glean.
Yes, sir. And my final question is, with everything being paused right now, and I think one of the greatest things about at least my job, what it's become, is we're not looking at just game film anymore. We're not looking at athletes based on just the numbers they put up anymore. And it's not to say that that was solely what we were doing prior to this, but we really are looking at student athletes more as people now, rather than as more of on the person side, the individual side, rather than just the athlete side. And I think it's been one of the greatest parts is just getting to know these athletes as people, who they are outside of the uniform for the past month or so. Is there, in your eyes, Curt, is there anything collectively good that can come out of taking a pause like this and taking a break from live sports before we inevitably get back to them?
Yeah, I think there are a number of things that can come out about it. One is the simple fact that we live in a society, in a country, that we do have this as a form of entertainment. It is a big business, obviously. It has a big component to our overall economic health around the country, but it's nice to have that. That's an economy that can develop all these submarkets is how it moves along and grows. So one, I think we can take a deep breath when this is all over. I expect a big party, a global party when this is all over. At the end of one of the Star Wars movies, they were on one of the planets after they blasted the Death Star out of the sky, and they all had this. That's kind of what I envisioned. So, but I think I think we'll take less for granted. And some of those things that we took for granted were just creature comforts, things that were out there that we could just move along in our day. It's something I stress even in my broadcasting class, is that you have this profession, or you have this hope to go into this profession because we live in this economy, and we've got everybody else out there growing our food and bringing it to us and all. So we don't have to spend our days doing that. It's a subtle message there, but I think there is that. The other thing that's kind of interesting, Jordan, that kind of came to mind here is that, one of the reasons I've remained in college athletics as long as I have is because of working with the student athletes. And what the general public is now seeing is why I enjoy working with student athletes, because you're getting to know them as people, as opposed to, yeah, he carried the ball this much, she scored that many goals, she scored that many points in a football in a basketball game, those type of things. So yeah, I think there's a lot of positive that can come out, but gosh, I wish we didn't have to go through this torture to get there. But we're resilient. We make the adjustments as a society and move along, and that goes in more than just dealing with COVID.
Yes, sir. And that planet you were looking for, that was Endor.
Endor. Thank you very much. There you go.
You're welcome.
I appreciate that. Yeah, that's good.
All right. Well, Curt, we appreciate you being on the show today. Thank you for your time, and just continue to stay safe out there. Really.
Thank you. You do the same, Jordan. Thank you for your efforts there.
Yeah, absolutely. And sport fans, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Breeze TV Sports Desk. From Curt, Jordan, thank you so much. Have a great day.
Go Dukes.
Go Dukes.